Hello, algebra students. It's Mrs. Thompson. We're in example 5 in section 9.2, and I'm on graph paper because we're continuing to graph. This time I'm going to do 2 different graphs to kind of show you what it looks like because they're going to come out of different directions than even the other 2 examples I just did with you. So the first one we're going to do is y equals 3 times 1/2 raised to the x. This time our focus is what happens to the graph when I change b from being a number that's bigger than 1 to a number that's a decimal or a fraction less than 1, that's between 0 and 1. And I want to show you what that looks like mathematically, and then graphically we're going to throw it on a graph and see what direction this this exponential function is going to come. So the first number we're going to plug in is x. We're going to plug in a -1, and I've got that started right up here at the top. Now this part, remember, only the b is being raised to the -1 power. We learned a trick a couple of weeks back where if you ever have a fraction raised to a negative exponent, all you have to do is flip that fraction over and it becomes a whole number now. 1/2 becomes 2, and that makes your negative exponent a positive exponent. We talked about that some weeks ago. We've had quite a few weeks to actually forget that little trick, okay? So 1/2 raised to the -1 power is the exact same thing as 2 to the first power, okay? So I want to make sure I'm real clear. 2 to the first power is 2, and 2 times 3 is 6. We plug in 0. Remember, anything raised to the 0 power is 1. So that becomes a 1, and 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 1/2 raised to the 1. So 1/2 raised to the 1 is 1/2. Half of 3 is 1.5. Okay. If I can get my decimal here. There it goes. And then 3 times 1/2 raised to the 2. So 1/2 raised to the 2 is 1/4, and 1/4 of 3 is 0.75 or 3/4. Okay, so that's what you're going to end up graphing. So let's create kind of our XY table here, coordinate plane, and I'm just going to go by ones. I think that's going to be easier in the long run. So -1, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here it is. I'm going to draw my circle right here on that grid intersection. 0, 3, 1, 2, 3, and do that again. 1, 1.5. So I'm going to go halfway between 1 and 2. And then 2 and 0.75. We're going to kind of do that about, I wish I had kind of like a pencil tip instead of this rubber tip, because they just don't like doing delicate work. So let's see if I can just draw a little dash there. And then we're gonna just draw our line right through that. And that's what it's gonna look like. So remember in example 1, it looked like a J hook. Okay, so with reference to the X and Y axis, and then the last example, ours kind of look like this, and this time, look what it's doing. It's coming high up and coming down like that. So it's kind of like a backwards J, So that's what happens when you have a B that's a decimal, and your A is positive. You're going to be above the x-axis since A is positive, but it's going to approach the x-axis on the positive side much more closely on the positive side of the x-axis than on the negative side. It's going to infinitely approach but never cross. Okay, so let's move over here to letter B. Now this time we're going to work under the x-axis because A is negative. That's going to put all our numbers, make them negative. And then again, our B is a decimal. So let's see kind of the direction that this is going to come out of. So when we plug it in, the best thing to do is just plug it into your calculator to find out each of your Y values. So the first time through, you're going to plug in -2 times 0.4, and then you're going to raise that to the negative 2 power, okay? You're going to get negative 12.5 when you calculate that. When you do plug negative 1 in, and you do negative 2 times 4 raised to the negative 1, you're going to get negative 5. Then when we do plug 0 in, you're going to do negative 2 times 0.4 raised to the 0. Now you could probably do this mentally, and because you know anything to the 0 power is 1, and 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. And then last but not least, plug in negative 2 times 0.4 raised to the first power, and you're going to get negative 0.8. Okay? So that's good. We see negative 12.5 is going to be our lowest y. So let's draw this very bottom heavy. Okay? Let me see if I've got negative 13 on here. So I got negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and here's negative 13. Because we want to go halfway between negative 12 and negative 13. All right, so we're going to find negative 2. Here it is. And we're going to drop it all the way down. And we're going to go halfway between negative 12 and negative 13. Then do the same thing for negative 1, negative 5. And mark that. Okay. 0, negative 2. Mark that right here on the y-axis. And then 1.8, just do the best you can to estimate where that is. I'm going to have to draw a little line since my little rubber tip on this stylus doesn't want to work, okay? So, and then we'll just connect our dots and I'm going to curve it up just like that, okay? So you can see that, you know, just like the last example we did, it's kind of coming from the positive side of that x and working its way down. So there are lots of ways these things can look. I would advise you to check with your calculator and make sure you're plugging the numbers in correctly and that you're getting it to go the correct direction. Okay, you guys did a great job. I did A and B for you. Why don't you do C and D for me for extra credit? And remind me that I said it was extra credit so I can give you the points for that, okay? Do it on paper, check with your calculator, and I'll see you in class. Write down any questions you may have. Thanks for listening.